Thank you, Justin. Morning, everybody. Let's get this clicker working. First of all, I'd just like to start off by thanking my sponsors, Arrivo. It's great to see them backing young potential agriculture leaders in our region, and it's great to see them still involved. They're involved now for the last 3 years, including the 2015 scholar Kevin Moran, and it's great to see it, and hopefully that'll continue for a long time yet to come. Also, thank you to Nuffield for the opportunity. It's been a brilliant 2 years, and really enjoyed the experience. So, just in relation to myself, personal introduction. I'll skip these on here. My name is Sean O'Donnell, obviously. I come from Ballina, County Mayo. I'm married to Jackie, and we have 3 boys. And we're currently milking about 110 cows in a low-cost grass-based system. We're also involved in 2 collaborative farming arrangements, one in the form of a heifer rearing arrangement, and the other in the form of a contract silage arrangement, which encompasses in total about 95 hectares. I was also fortunate enough this year to have been awarded the FPD Mocker na Firma Young Farmer of the Year, and that was a real honour as well. So my study topic is farm fragmentation in Irish dairying, overcoming and adapting to it. And some of the reasons just outline why I came to this topic was from my involvement in local discussion groups, where a lot of small-scale farmers are wondering where they fit in relation to the whole expansion buzz that's going to happen from next year onwards. Also, my own farm is a fragmented holding, and I have an outside block of land that may be suitable for milk production, and I wanted to see if it could be streamlined and fit into the original home farm. And also, in the longer term, if a larger block of land became available, could that land be brought into milk production? I suppose with this in mind, next year, 2015, it's a once-in-a-generational opportunity for dairy farmers to expand in this country, and most dairy farmers have been gearing up for it through the Farm Waste Management Scheme, rearing extra heifers, reseeding ongoing farm works. But the biggest issue is going to be the number of hectares available around the milking parlour to milk cows on, otherwise known as the milking platform. And in this country, we've been bound traditionally by our history, and that means that the amount and the frequency of land that is traded on the open market is generally very, very small. And the average farm at the moment is about 32 hectares, but unfortunately it's divided up into 3.5 land parcels. And most farmers who have expanded over the last number of years have done so onto lease farms or additional outside blocks of land. And it's with this in mind that I sought to see if these lands could be brought into milk production. And I decided to focus on 4 systems of bringing those lands into milk production. And those are the milking robot, the zero grazing system, the second parlour, and a once-a-day system through a second parlour. And within that, I looked at them to see if they were cost effective, whether it was labour efficient, and ultimately in the longer term, whether or not it was sustainable to run those systems. So within the study topic, I travelled extensively over the last 2 years, places like Canada, New Zealand, the Netherlands, the UK, Belgium, Northern Ireland as well, and extensively around Ireland to try and find as much information as I could on each of the 4 different scenarios. So when I came back home, I decided to develop a modelling scenario to compare and contrast the 4 different situations. And this was done in conjunction with Lawrence Shalhoub from Teagasc Moor Park. He assisted me in developing the model. So what I looked at was the 4 farm models. And I decided to look at an outside farm, an outside block that was milking, there was a 70-acre block of land, or 28 hectares. And on that, the farmer was going to put 70 cows. I assumed that it was a greenfield site, that there was no infrastructure in place, that all the works had to be done, like roadways, water, etc. I also assumed that all the money to set the farm up, from the cows to the concrete or whatever was involved, was done from borrowed money. And the money was borrowed over a 10-year time frame and borrowed at current quoted bank interest rates. Also within the model, I assumed a labour costing based on a per cow basis and also on a per hour basis to come up with an ideal labour charge to run each system. So once I'd done that, I looked, as I said, at each outside farm to see whether it was financially going to stack up at that level of scale. And then I looked to see if it could be integrated into an original home farm scenario. So you have 2 blocks of land. You have the home farm, a typical Irish farmer, with the example that I used. An average farmer in this country is milking 70 cows. Can that farmer, with an outside block, bringing together now a new farm milking 140 cows, is it a profitable scenario, and could the farmer make money doing it? So with each of the 4 systems, I looked at the potential margin of the farm system when integrated with the home farm, and this is what I came up with. We adjusted once-a-day yield on the outside farm for one of the scenarios, reduced a drop in milk yield. Also, we adjusted for milk price, base price of 28 cents a litre that was adjusted for milk solids. There was a cost of debt on each system, a cost of labour, And then there was the overall margin. And within this system, or within this model, the second parlour showed up to be the most profitable system, with the once a day a very close second. But even on a margin a cent a litre basis, the once a day showed up to be driving the best margin on a cent a litre basis. As in terms of conclusions, look, there's a huge appetite out there post-quota to expand milk production. Expansion is expensive. Teagasc quota about €4,000 a cow. I think the farmers that are most open-minded and adaptable within a farm fragmented situation are the ones that will prosper. It is still usually profitable to dairy in a fragmented situation, although it is less labour efficient. In terms of the robot, from the system and the model that I looked at, it is only marginally profitable to develop a robot on an outside block of land. It is also usually capital intensive. The amount of debt associated with that system in terms of the scale and the amount of cows you can put through it is quite large. The technology has improved in relation to the robotic milkers over the last number of years. They are becoming more reliable and they are highly efficient. But the one thing I would say about them is at the moment there's a lot of salesmanship going on. There's a lot of hype surrounding these pieces of equipment. There's a lot of marketing going on. And it's very, very hard to get very defined research and science backing the information on robots. And there's a lot of farmers who are going to commit a lot of money to these systems. And I would suggest they need to do their research before they consider buying one. In relation to the zero grazer, they are labour intensive. They increase the running costs of your farm, generally speaking. I don't think we have to look too far only across the border into Northern Ireland to see what's happening there. A lot of guys on smaller blocks of land have pushed up stocking rates, increased the amount of bought-in feed onto farms. And generally speaking, has resulted in an increase in turnover, an increase in profit margin over feed. But overall, when all the other costs are included, it has actually resulted in a reduced profit margin on those farms. Again, with this system, there's a lot of salesmanship, and I've been privy to this over the last 2 years at a lot of different functions and scenarios that I've been to, and some of the information that's out there is just not true. In relation to the second parlour, it's a cheap and flexible system. It is a high profit system, as is shown in the model. It delivers the highest profit. It can be integrated very simply with minimal decision making with the home farm. It offers the greatest potential for expansion longer term, and also I suppose maybe it's a weakness or a strength. You have labour there, and as I said, it can be utilised to its maximum, but it obviously needs a minimum level of scale for it to be efficient. In relation to once a day, it is usually labour saving, up to 40% of a labour saving in that scenario. Again, it's a very high profit system, but it is very dependent on the inputs reducing in line with the drop in production. Generally, in once a day milk production, milk yield will drop by about 25% or between 20 and 30% based on the research. And it's very important that any of the inputs that are going onto the farm drop in line with the drop in milk yield. I suppose that can be partially offset in the longer term by an increase in stocking rate. So moving on then to my recommendations, I think there's further research required into this topic. I note that Moorepark are commissioning a 4-year PhD to start research on this exact topic from next year, starting in February. So they'll be looking at the farm fragmentation issue. I think in the longer term, Teagasc need to develop alternative viable dairying models. It's not going to be all about greenfield sites and 300 cows post-2015. There's a lot of small-scale farmers who are wondering where they fit in relation to the post-quota expansion. I think Teagasc should develop a commercially run research program that outlines something similar maybe to the heavy soils program, whereby there are farmers on the ground who are introducing or implementing these different sets of technology to see which ones have the ability to deliver the best margin on the farm. And this information should be disseminated to the wider dairy industry. For a farmer who's looking to go onto an outside farm or a second unit straight away, I think the second parlour should be the first choice. As I said earlier, it offers the greatest flexibility, the greatest potential to expand further, and delivers the best margin. I suppose this is a little bit of a funny one in relation to the robots. I think it has a place for smaller scale farmers, not so much in the fragmented context, but maybe for smaller scale farmers where they have the cows and they have the infrastructure on their farms already. I visited a number of farmers who are working part-time and continue to milk cows. I think if you look at the National Farm Survey from 2010 to 2012, the average dairy farmer in this country delivered a profit per hectare of €955. That was before the single farm payment. If you take a farmer out of the dairy sector and put him into an alternative sector, say for instance the single suckling sector, the average farmer in the same period delivered a loss of minus €54 a hectare before the single farm payment. So that's a difference of €1,000 a hectare. And if you take that in a socio-economic point of view or from a rural Ireland point of view in small towns and villages across the country, it'll be very important that you should try and retain as many farmers in the most profitable sectors as possible. The one thing I will say about this going forward, there is a research programme in place at the moment in Teagasc in association with the Grassland Society. To be very, very frank about it, it's just not fit for purpose. They've done some research there on grassland management. That research was done 10 years ago in New Zealand. It needs to be completely overhauled, it needs to be upgraded, and it needs to be completely financially focused. There's too much money involved in a decision like this for farmers to be making bad decisions going forward. And ultimately, any information should be backed by research. Any decision to buy a robot, as I said, should be backed by research and science. And currently that's not the case. And farmers are being told a lot of figures, as I said, by salesmanship, by marketing and PR. And I don't think that's a good place to be for anyone. Again, in relation to zero grazer, it maybe has a place on the shoulders of the ear. Overall, though, I would suggest that any farmer considering expansion should not be thinking about doing it on the back of a zero grazer. Again, it's not the place to be. My experience from being in Northern Ireland, looking at different systems, was generally speaking, when farmers went over a stocking rate of 3.5 cows to the hectare, it did result in an increase in turnover. It did result in an increase in feed over margin costs. But overall, when all the other costs, as I said, were introduced, it resulted in a profit reduction in that system. In terms of the once a day, I feel there's a place for a once a day weighting in the EBI. I think if we look 10 or 15 years down the line at where the industry is going, most of the expansion will have happened at that stage. Most farmers will have maxed out their land blocks or maxed out their outside and be looking maybe to go onto the outside blocks or onto a second unit. And that position, labour will then become the limiting factor. And if you look 10 or 15 years down the line, if we can breed a cow, similar to what the BW is doing in New Zealand, breed a cow that's predisposed to once a day milking, that's genetically fit for purpose, and it will limit the amount of cost that has to be incurred at farm level through the culling of cows for lameness or somatic cell count or whatever the different issues would be. And if we can deliver an animal as an industry for that situation where labour will be limiting, I think it would be good for us. I think once a day in the longer term, I think will be a real option for farmers on a fragmented farm. I think that's pretty much it for me. Hopefully I've stoked a few people's minds. Hopefully it'll result in a bit of debate and a bit of conversation. It's been a contentious sort of a topic. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on it. Everywhere I go, someone has something to say about it anyway. But finally, I'd just like to thank Arrivo again for sponsoring my Nuffield scholarship. It's been a roller coaster 2 years, really enjoyable. And also like to thank Nuffield for giving me the opportunity, a brilliant organisation and a superb platform for learning and self-development. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'd also like to finally say thank you to my wife Jackie, my kids and my father for minding the farm when I was away. And I'll just leave you with a small quote there to have a think about. And I'll ask you for any questions later on. Okay, thank you.